first one is Robert Satloff, who's the Executive Director of the Washington Institute. Many of you may have seen his well-known documentary about how the Holocaust impacted Arab lands and what Arabs did in the Middle East during that era. An expert on Arab and Islamic politics, the Arab-Israeli peace process, and U.S. Middle East policy, Dr. Satloff leads an acclaimed team of foreign policy experts that provides authoritative, impartial advice to both Democratic and Republican administrations. The author, editor of 9 books and monographs, Satloff's on the views on the Middle East appear frequently in major newspapers such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the Los Angeles Times, and he's a regular commentator on major television networks and NPR. In addition, he hosts a weekly news show on the U.S. government's Arabic satellite channel, the only non-Arab to host a show on any Arabic satellite channel. Robert, thank you for joining us, and please give a warm welcome to Robert Satloff. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be with you today on this day devoted to understanding the hows and whys of Israel advocacy. I think it is just so important to have an active and activated group of Americans, because in our country, the real basis of U.S.-Israel strategic partnership lies with people like you. I don't say that as a bumper sticker. I don't say that as a throwaway line. I say that as somebody who's devoted the last 25 years to being in Washington and understanding how and why our policy works. And one of the things that I've come away with, after dealing at very high political levels in both Republican and Democratic administrations, is indeed that the strength of the U.S.-Israel partnership depends to a huge extent on you, on the activism of people like you. And so I say that with all seriousness as we start our discussions today. Please recognize that the success of this partnership is because of Americans like you and Americans not like you, all across our country. Jews, Christians, people who don't believe in God at all. Maybe Jews don't believe in God. Christians don't believe in God. It doesn't make a difference. It's because of the power of American citizens that our representatives and our leaders take seriously the importance of the partnership with Israel. I want to spend a few minutes talking to you today about the new Middle East. But the first observation that you should begin with in understanding the new Middle East is how much of the old Middle East is still with us. How much of the old paradigm you probably haven't been reading about in the last month because journalists have been so busy with the new paradigm. How many of you know that more than 70 Iranians were executed by the Ayatollah regime in Iran last month for political crimes? How many of you know that rockets landed in the outskirts of Beersheba in just the last few days? That's good. How many of you read about it in the Washington Post? That's a different story. How many of you know that back on the table for discussion is the idea of Hamas-Fatah reconciliation? How many of you read about that in the New York Times or the Washington Post? An inch, 2 inches at most. I say all this not because there hasn't been huge change in the Middle East in the last month. I say all this to remind everybody in this room that some things haven't changed. And some of the most serious challenges to Israeli security and to the U.S.-Israel partnership persist, despite all the good news, despite all the hope, despite all the courage that we've seen in the last month. It is absolutely true that the winds of change have altered some of the basic dynamics of the Middle East. We see it
in the really remarkable courage of the young people in Tahrir Square. We saw it by that young man in that small town in Tunisia who just absolutely had enough. Highly educated, well-trained, was asked for a bribe in order to run a small kiosk. And he had enough. And from that outrage was launched a revolution. I have been urging the pro-Israel community to embrace the spirit of democratic change in the Middle East. The pro-Israel community should be on the side of democratic change, should embrace it, should cherish it, should celebrate it. And indeed, I hope that people in this room and institutions in the government of Israel offer the best of what they have, their science, their technology, their medicine, their education, to embrace all those who have been fighting for real democratic change in Arab countries. And I even think there's even more that Israel can do to embrace it, to cherish it, to celebrate it. Let's be on the right side of this. And that's because 2011 was not like, and has not so far been like, the two other seismic years in modern Middle East history, 1948 and 1967. 2011, just like those other 2 years, have been all about changes in regime, changes in politics, earthquakes in the Middle East. But unlike 1948 and unlike 1967, 2011 so far has not been about the question of Palestine, not been about the question of Israel, not been about the role of Jews in the Middle East, not been about these issues at all. It has been Arabs looking inward to change their lives. And that's something that we should all say, hooray. This is something we should all have been working for. And to the extent that this is indeed what 2011 is about, this is good for Israel. And we should promote it. Now, we know what it isn't, but we don't really yet know what it will be. We don't really yet know that 2011 will be 1989, the year of the fall of the Berlin Wall, a year that gave birth to democracies in all of Eastern Europe? Or will it be 1979, a year that saw a great dictator fall in Iran, only to be replaced before too long by the regime of the Ayatollah? Or will it be 1952, a year that saw the king of Egypt escorted out and his generals taking over? Or will it be 1954, when we finally realized that it wasn't really the king's generals running the revolution, but young colonels, a young colonel by the name of Nasser, who got rid of the generals and began to take Egypt in a totally different path than we first thought when the revolution began. We don't know how this year is going to end up. So I offer these suggestions. Embrace the Democrats, celebrate the potential for change, but be vigilant. Be vigilant about the potential for this turning in the wrong direction. Be concerned about the strength of the Muslim Brotherhood. Don't listen to people who say that the Muslim Brotherhood is just an Egyptian form of the March of Dimes. Because it isn't. This is not a humanitarian institution concerned about the welfare of Egyptian poor and unfortunate. This is an ideological group committed to the imposition of Islamist Sharia law and the eventual creation of Egypt, and even more broadly, Muslim societies as Islamist states. They bide their time. They are very long-range thinkers. But this is what their goal is. So be vigilant about where they are in society. Be concerned about the pace of change. The cardinal rule should be, make haste slowly. Make haste slowly. Yes, change the institutions of government. Yes, elections. Yes, new forms of parties, new forms of government, constitutional changes. But not overnight. Not by tomorrow morning. Recognize that in our country, it took years to build the institutions of democracy. And while the Egyptians and Tunisians and others should not wait decades, they have to wait more than 20 minutes. Certain things need time to take root. Give them that time. Let it take root. And here, let's remember that our adversaries should not be allowed to inherit the benefits of those courageous people. The Iranians especially. When you look for change in places like Bahrain, keep your eye on the other side of the Persian Gulf. About who will inherit the change. Who is already inheriting the change in Lebanon because we've been focused so much on Egypt? It's Iran and its partners. And remember, most fundamentally, that at a moment when our Egyptian pillar has crumbled, at a moment when our Turkish pillar has turned so far against what we always counted on as friendly, secular NATO Turkey. This leaves one firm, democratic partner and pillar that can project American and Western values at home and abroad in the Middle East. And that partner is, of course, Israel. So at a time as when we should all be reaching out and strengthening the Democrats in Arab countries, let us not forget that it is no less important to project the strength of the U.S.-Israel strategic partnership. People in the Middle East have to know that whatever differences there is between the United States and Israel on this or that issue in the peace process, the partnership is firm. The partnership is strong. And this partnership shall not be sacrificed on the altar of the potential for change elsewhere in the Middle East. Speak up to your representatives about this, because there's a great debate right now in the higher levels of Washington, and the debate is whether Israel is an asset or Israel is a liability. Does Israel help us project our interest, or does Israel serve as an albatross that prevents us from projecting our interests in the Middle East? Now, more than ever, when there's so much uncertainty, when the Iranians seem eager to inherit the potential for change, now more than ever, it's important for everyone in this room to talk to your representatives, to speak up and speak loudly, that now is the time to strengthen, not walk away from the U.S.-Israel strategic partnership. We need to build our alliance in military terms, in security terms, but no less in political terms, which is why some of the verbiage that came out a week ago last Friday surrounding the American veto of this absurd Security Council resolution, some of the verbiage, I think, was terribly damaging. Verbiage that could only serve to strengthen the rejectionists and not embolden the peacemakers. Words matter, actions matter, speak up and speak out, because the great debate will be settled by people like you. Thank you very much.